Vaping and the use of e-cigarette products is affecting families across the country and is also impacting people you may know right here in Delaware. Today we're joined by Dr. Maheshwari, who's here to talk all things vaping and answer many of the questions that you may have. Thank you for joining us today. Why don't you start by introducing yourself to our audience?
Sure. I'm the Vice Chair of the Department of Medicine at Christiana Care Hospital, and I'm also a pulmonary and critical care physician, so have been seeing patients that have had vaping-induced injury.
So before we get down to kind of the details of why vaping is in the news so often, why don't you explain what is vaping? A lot of people have no idea what this even is.
Right. So vaping is synonymous with the terms e-cigarette use or juuling. And what it involves a mechanism or a delivery device that heats an oil or solvent into an aerosol form that then individuals can take and inhale through into their lungs.
So this isn't new, correct? Vaping's been around.
It's been around for several years.
That right now it's a hot topic for a multitude of reasons. The CDC has now activated Emergency Operations Center in order to try to tackle this issue. And in response to at least 6 deaths, 380 confirmed cases of lung illnesses associated with the use of e-cigarette products, Delaware Division of Public Health is now getting involved. Why is this so dangerous?
So vaping or e-cigarette use has been around for a while, as you mentioned, and initially thought to be a way to move patients from cigarette smoking to maybe a safer alternative. And in relatively rare circumstances, it may be a safer alternative than cigarette use. But in more recent instances, we've identified that vaping is associated with severe respiratory injury. There's some type of toxic components to what's in the vaping liquid or solvent that's causing direct injury to the lungs. It's causing patients to become extremely ill, some of which have required intensive care support, being put on a ventilator, and in some cases have passed away. But in addition to that, there are a whole host of chronic components in terms of dangers of vaping that have been known about or we're increasing to become aware about, and it's something that I think deserves a lot more attention as well.
Many people are wondering, it still can't be as bad as cigarette smoking, and especially the Juuls, they're all, it tastes like cherry, how can it be that bad? But just today, the American Heart Association of Delaware tweeted that one Juul pod is the equivalent of 20 cigarettes worth of nicotine. So obviously, there is an issue here.
Yes, so nicotine is the most common component found in a lot of these vaping or e-cigarette components. And nicotine is a highly addictive substance, particularly in youth and young adult populations. It directly crosses into the brain. It can be highly addictive. It can lead to changes in development of the brain. It can lead to changes in coordination, concentration, performance at school. So it has a lot of negative consequences. But in addition to that, there are other substances that can be used in these vaping or e-cigarette type devices and include components like THC, which is the key ingredient in marijuana, as well as some other substances that can cause a lot of long-term consequences.
So as you mentioned, there's potentially marijuana in some of these products. Other than nicotine and potentially marijuana, what are we consuming?
So that's the other component that is not quite known, but a lot of times we're mixing these solvents with other things like that have hard metals and other toxic components, and in fact may be the components that lead to some of the cancer-inducing substances and also may be responsible for the spate of acute lung injury that we've been seeing as well.
I know we've referenced nicotine. Obviously nicotine's addictive. Is vaping as addictive?
So vaping, or the mechanism by which we get nicotine, can be just as addictive as you might administer it through cigarette smoking. And in some cases, the amount of nicotine that's put into these devices is much more than in cigarettes. And in other cases, it's an unregulated industry. So what's happening now is we're seeing sort of a street market that's developed by taking either used pods or buying unfilled pods and then filling them with a variety of substances that we don't really understand the concentrations of. And so all of those make the potential for addictive type personalities or disease much more concerning.
As I mentioned, the CDC is reporting hundreds of illnesses surrounding what they believe to be vaping and e-cigarette use. What is it really doing to your body?
So it's inducing some type of acute lung reaction, and we believe it's these toxic substances that are in this mix in the solvent that's going in and causing inflammation within the lungs, and that becomes fairly rampant. And so until we really pin down what the specific components of that are, I think there should be heightened awareness about the dangers of vaping in general. And certainly, if someone starts developing cough, irritation, symptoms with trouble breathing, and there's a concern that it may be related to vaping, they should seek at least advice from their physician and some medical attention. That will help us determine what type of connections there may be with certain types of vaping, but also may bring these patients to attention much faster. In the instances in which these patients have had really severe illness, it's happened fairly rapidly and often at a stage where what we could do was limited. But we are finding from some of these early cases that there are some interventions that we can employ that can limit the severity of the disease.
What do you say to patients who have children, who their teen is saying, you know, Mom, it tastes like cherry, it can't be that bad, just let it go, it's totally fine? What kind of conversation can parents have with their teens?
Well, that's one of the amazing and concerning components of the way that these devices have been marketed. So manufacturers such as Juul, which is the largest manufacturer of the vaping industry, create flavors like bubblegum and cherry and mango. So they seem really innocuous. And in some instances, I believe that people aren't even aware that nicotine is actually in here. But all of that to say that almost in every instance it either has nicotine, THC, or some other toxic substance. All of them are highly concerning in terms of its impact on the young adult's brain and what it can do to impact their performance at school, their interactions with you at home. It can exacerbate things like mental illness such as depression and anxiety. So it's very highly concerning in terms of a young adult and youth using these types of devices.
And what about secondhand vape? We know secondhand smoke is dangerous if someone smokes in your home, but say your 17-year-old is vaping, is your 13-year-old also at risk?
So certainly patients that might be at more risk are those who are prone to respiratory-related illness. Maybe someone who has chronic asthma might be more likely to have an asthma exacerbation. That's what some of the earlier information is determining. But certainly even in younger children, it can lead to cough and respiratory-related illness. So that's the most obvious dangers of secondhand vaping. What is not clear to us at this point, whether it might lead to higher incidences of cancer or addiction, we don't have enough information to really determine that at this time.
If there is one point that you want parents and teens who are watching this to really take home, what would that be?
One, vaping's dangerous. It has a lot of short-term and long-term complications. Two, it's really difficult for patients and parents particularly, and even teachers, to really understand whether someone's vaping. Some of the devices that people are using really hide it, so have a heightened awareness. And three, and most importantly, talk to your children about the dangers of vaping before they get engaged. If you're suspicious, have a conversation with them about that and what their friends might be doing, because there's an opportunity to intervene.
And if there is a parent who talks to their child and is now seeing some of the symptoms of the potential illness that this causes, what should they do?
So I think first, see if there's a connection to vaping, and then two, I would seek medical attention right away with your local physician to have a better understanding of whether it's connected to this or something else. But it also will help our state agencies and our national agencies get a better handle of the situation.
Thank you so much for answering all of the questions today. And if you have more questions about vaping or the use of e-cigarette products, please leave your questions in the comments below this video, and we will do our best to get back to you as soon as possible.